Welcome to Reenact History. Today we will deep dive into one of the most pivotal moments in the annals of Indian history, the consequences of the Revolt of 1857. This watershed event, often referred to as the Sepoy Mutiny, irrevocably reshaped the British Empire and left an indelible mark on the Indian subcontinent. It began as a localized rebellion by Indian soldiers fueled by a complex web of grievances against British rule, but quickly escalated into a widespread uprising that challenged the very foundations of colonial power. The Revolt of 1857 was not merely an isolated incident, it was a culmination of decades of simmering discontent. The British East India Company, which had governed vast swathes of India for over a century, had implemented policies that alienated various segments of Indian society. Economic exploitation, religious insensitivity, and political annexations all contributed to a volatile atmosphere, setting the stage for the dramatic events that unfolded. The introduction of new rifle cartridges, rumored to be greased with animal fat offensive to both Hindu and Muslim sepoys, served as the immediate spark that ignited the widespread conflagration. The rebellion, though ultimately suppressed with brutal force, sent shockwaves across the British Empire. Its immediate aftermath was characterized by widespread violence, retribution, and a fundamental reevaluation of British colonial strategy. The suppression of the revolt was a bloody affair, marked by significant loss of life on all sides and a determined effort by the British to reassert their dominance. This period of intense conflict and subsequent pacification laid the groundwork for profound and far-reaching consequences that would shape India's destiny for the next century. One of the most immediate and overarching results of the Revolt of 1857 was the definitive end of the British East India Company's rule. For over 100 years, this powerful trading corporation had effectively governed India, wielding immense political and military authority. However, the scale and intensity of the revolt exposed the company's administrative weaknesses and its inability to maintain control, leading to a decisive intervention by the British government. Company, once a symbol of British commercial and imperial ambition, was dissolved, marking the close of a unique chapter in colonial history. With the dissolution of the East India Company, direct British control over India was formally established. This momentous shift ushered in the era of the British Raj, a period of direct imperial governance that would last until India's independence in 1947. The governance structure underwent a significant transformation, symbolizing the Crown's direct assumption of responsibility. The Governor-General, previously the company's highest representative, was replaced by a viceroy, who served as the direct representative of the British monarch, embodying the sovereign's authority and prestige. This change was not merely symbolic, it signified a fundamental reorientation of power and accountability, bringing India directly under the purview of the British Parliament and the Crown. The consequences of the Revolt of 1857 extended far beyond the immediate transfer of power, permeating administrative, military, economic, social, and cultural spheres. The British, having narrowly averted a complete loss of their most prized colonial possession, embarked on a series of comprehensive reforms designed to prevent any future uprisings and solidify their control. These reforms were often strategic, calculated to maintain dominance while ostensibly addressing some of the underlying grievances that had fueled the rebellion. In the administrative and military spheres, significant reorganizations were implemented. The British Indian Army, which had been largely composed of Indian sepoys, underwent a drastic restructuring. A greater emphasis was placed on increasing the proportion of British soldiers within the army, ensuring that British troops always outnumbered their Indian counterparts in key strategic locations. This was a direct response to the realization that the loyalty of Indian soldiers could not be taken for granted. Furthermore, artillery units were almost exclusively manned by British personnel, reflecting a deep-seated distrust of Indian forces handling heavy weaponry. Beyond numerical adjustments, the British adopted a more sophisticated and insidious strategic approach, the implementation of a divide-and-rule policy. This strategy involved deliberately fostering divisions among different religious, ethnic, and caste groups within India. The British began to recruit soldiers from communities that had remained loyal during the revolt, such as the Sikhs, Gurkhas, and Pathans, often portraying them as martial races, superior to others. This selective recruitment created new loyalties and rivalries, ensuring that no single group could pose a unified threat to British authority. The aim was clear: to prevent future uprisings by ensuring that Indian communities remained fragmented and suspicious of one another, rather than uniting against the colonial power. This policy had long-lasting and detrimental effects on Indian society, exacerbating existing tensions and creating new ones that would persist even after independence. Economically, the consequences of the revolt were equally profound, leading to increased exploitation of Indian resources. The British government, now directly in charge, intensified policies designed to benefit British industries and the British economy. India was increasingly viewed as a captive market for British manufactured goods and a reliable source of raw materials for British factories. This meant that Indian industries, particularly traditional crafts and textiles, faced severe competition from cheaper, mass-produced British goods, often leading to their decline. Policies were implemented to facilitate the extraction of raw materials like cotton, jute, and indigo, which were then shipped to Britain for processing. Indian farmers were often coerced into cultivating cash crops for export, rather than food crops for local consumption, making them vulnerable to market fluctuations and famines. The revenue generated from India was systematically siphoned off to Britain, contributing significantly to Britain's industrial growth and imperial wealth. This economic drain often occurred at the expense of Indian businesses and farmers, stifling indigenous economic development and leading to widespread poverty and recurrent famines across the subcontinent. The economic policies of the Raj were designed to serve British interests, often with devastating consequences for the Indian populace, deepening the economic disparity between the colonizer and the colonized. The social and cultural impact of the Revolt of 1857 was complex and multifaceted. While the immediate aftermath saw a period of increased racial animosity and a reinforcement of British superiority, the long-term effect was a paradoxical one. It inadvertently fostered a nascent sense of Indian nationalism. The shared experience of oppression and the collective memory of the revolt, despite its failure, began to forge a common identity among diverse Indian communities. The brutal suppression of the rebellion and the subsequent imposition of direct British rule highlighted the need for a unified Indian response to colonial domination. This growing awareness of a shared destiny and a common adversary laid the groundwork for the independence movement that would gain momentum in the decades to come. Indian intellectuals and leaders began to articulate a vision of a self-governing India, drawing inspiration from the sacrifices made during the revolt. The British, in their efforts to consolidate power, also introduced certain reforms, albeit limited, that inadvertently contributed to this awakening. The establishment of universities in major cities like Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras, though primarily intended to produce a class of educated Indians loyal to the British administration, also created a new intelligentsia. This group, exposed to Western political thought and ideals of liberty and self-determination, would eventually become the vanguard of the nationalist movement. Furthermore, infrastructure projects, such as the expansion of railways and telegraph lines, while serving British administrative and economic interests, also facilitated greater connectivity and communication among Indians across the vast subcontinent. This improved connectivity helped in the dissemination of nationalist ideas and the organization of political movements. However, these reforms were always secondary to the primary goal of maintaining British control and exploiting Indian resources. The British approach to social and cultural matters became more cautious after the revolt, as they realized that interfering with religious and social customs could provoke widespread resistance. This led to a policy of non-interference in certain traditional practices, even as they continued to assert their cultural and racial superiority. In summary, the Revolt of 1857 stands as a monumental turning point in Indian history, with consequences that reverberated for generations. Its immediate aftermath saw the dissolution of the powerful East India Company, bringing an end to its century-long rule. This was swiftly followed by the direct rule of the British Crown, ushering in the era of the British Raj and fundamentally altering the governance structure of India. The British implemented significant administrative and military reforms, including the reorganization of the army with a greater emphasis on British soldiers and the strategic adoption of a divide-and-rule policy to prevent future unified resistance. Economically, the revolt led to increased exploitation of Indian resources, with policies designed to benefit British industries, often at the severe expense of Indian businesses and farmers, contributing to widespread poverty. Paradoxically, despite the brutal suppression and increased colonial control, the revolt also played a crucial role in fostering a nascent sense of Indian nationalism, laying the essential groundwork for the eventual independence movement. The legacy of 1857 is complex, marked by both repression and the seeds of liberation. It serves as a powerful reminder of the costs of colonial rule and the enduring spirit of resistance. The events of that year continue to be studied and debated, offering invaluable insights into the dynamics of empire, rebellion, and the long road to self-determination. What do you think about the long-term consequences of the revolt of 1857? Let us know your thoughts and perspectives in the comments below. Your insights enrich our understanding of this critical historical period. If you found this detailed analysis informative and engaging, please don't forget to like this video. Your support helps us create more in-depth historical content. Also, be sure to subscribe to our channel for regular explorations of significant historical events and figures. And to ensure you never miss out on our future videos, hit that notification bell. Thanks for watching, and we look forward to continuing our historical journey with you.